Well, we're at 11, or not 11, 2. I'm in the Pacific time zone, so it's 11 for me, but we're at 2 Eastern time. I think we have quite a few participants, so I think I will get started now. So good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. I am Kat Eaton with JBS International. And thank you for joining today's Ask a Grantee Expert office hour session on the documentary No Matter What, A Family Story of Addiction Recovery with Chris Glover and Melanie Avila and Shannon Terrer. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's tire, just like
Tire.
card
Thank
tire.
you.
Yep.
Okay. With Chris Glover, Melanie Avila, and Shannon Tire. Before we begin, we'd like to review a couple housekeeping items. So today's presentation is intended to be interactive once the documentary has been shown. However, we ask that participants please keep themselves on mute unless requested to unmute and use the raise hand feature in Zoom or raise your hand in your video to indicate that you have a question. We do encourage you to turn on your video once the documentary is complete, especially when asking questions. In addition, please feel free to use the chat feature to interact with the presenters and ask questions as well. Open your chat window by clicking on the chat icon located at the bottom center of your toolbar. Near the end of the session, we will request that anyone who wants to receive additional information and resources related to this session and isn't on the OBC listserv, the OBC TTA listserv, send their email in the chat and we'll add you to this office hour sessions listserv specifically. There will be a link to a post-event survey sent in the chat at the end of the presentation, as well as email to all registered participants in the coming days. And we would greatly appreciate it if you filled it out, as this will support future development efforts. If you experience any technical issues during the session, please message us using the chat feature or email us at obc-tta@jbsinternational.com. Today's office hour session is also being recorded for sharing. The recording and presentation slides, along with any other resources made available, will be made available to the OBC TTA listserv in the coming weeks. And now I would like to turn it over to our experts for today.
Thanks, Kat. And thanks everybody for making time to join us this afternoon. My name is Chris Glover. I am representing a grant project that just wrapped up called Joining Forces for Children, and we are in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And one of the activities that we were able to do using our grant from OVC was to produce this documentary. It's a short film. It's about 20 minutes long. And we really decided to do this because we know that there are still a lot of negative attitudes and beliefs about people who use drugs in our community. And we know that one of the most effective ways to reduce those negative attitudes is through the sharing of stories of recovery. And because we are very focused on children and families, we wanted to incorporate the family voice and the youth voice in the way that we told this story. So we worked with a local family, and Shannon is here with us today. She is the mother/grandmother of the family, the matriarch. And she will be able to answer any questions that folks have. So we invite you to jot those down, and we look forward to chatting with you after the video. As other grantees, I would also invite you to consider, any information that might be helpful in terms of how we went about actually making the video, in addition to the content. And I think I'm going to stop rambling and ask Kat to play the video.
Sure thing. Let me technical stuff. Give me a moment.
Thanks, Kat.
Of course. All right. All right. I just want to make sure if I'm muted, people can hear it. One more time.
I was just conditioned to a life on the street. I didn't know any other way to be. Everything was hand to mouth. I didn't let anybody close to me. I was never in a non-artificially produced state. I was always under the influence of something, always.
It just continually spiraled. I was at the very bottom of feeling very hopeless.
My name's Scott, married to Shannon. She's really the rock of our family.
I met him at a bar. He already was well into his addiction.
I was really kind of at the worst point of my illness.
I'd had experience with addiction because my brother, but I didn't understand it the way that I do now.
And she got pregnant.
And then I had Dev.
So, you know, I'm going to do the right thing and be responsible for the child. I knew what that meant, but I wasn't capable of doing that. I have 3 stepchildren.
Braden is my oldest, and then Benjamin and Jared.
My biological daughter, Devlin. We got an apartment, and I got a job, and I functioned like I got to work most of the time. I made money. Pretty much all I did was give her my paycheck every week, you know, because other than that, I don't know how much more I was capable of.
And on the weekends, it was just mainly just drinking all day and then going to bed and then waking up and doing the same thing over again.
Well, Braden left young because she couldn't deal with the weekend shenanigans.
She was a senior in high school when she moved out because she couldn't take the situation in the house anymore.
So a lot of drinking, a lot of drug use, a lot of fighting.
You know, the kids would come over and then they would see all of that, and it just was, it wasn't really a great atmosphere for any of them to be in.
So she left. You know, she knew enough to know she didn't want to be around that, so she left.
And then there's Dev. I mean, she was just little, 2-3 years old. She had no clue what was going on.
And that went on for years until it just progressed, as the illness does, to a place to where I was so sick that I was blacking out, you know, days at a time. Entire weeks were just gone. I would essentially come to and not remember anything.
It was miserable for him. It was miserable for me. My kids were sad all the time.
I can remember coming back to the apartment one night, laying down and getting ready to go to bed, and I was fairly wasted. And just sort of saying to her, you know, I don't think I can ever change.
I was like, something has to happen. We can't continue like this. One of us is either going to end up really sick or hurt. Addiction doesn't discriminate, and it certainly doesn't care who you are, and sometimes the end result is death, but not all the time, and it doesn't have to be that way.
My dad got in a fight with my neighbor, and I was only probably 4 years old.
It was snowing like crazy.
A lot of snow. So we were stuck in the house.
And it was in the living room.
And I was just a wreck.
And he hit him a few times. All I remember is there was a lot of blood. There was a lot of alcohol, obviously. They were both drunk.
And eventually the cops came, and they told him that he had to settle down.
I had been to jail many, many times. And I think at that point, I had essentially given up. So I just didn't care anymore.
I just remember my mom holding my head against her chest, covering my ears. And then they took my dad.
He went to jail, and he was in there for a couple months. And when he got out, he had to get another place to live because he couldn't come back to the house.
Children and youth wouldn't let me see my child. I was supposed to stay, I think it was a quarter mile. I couldn't come anywhere near them. That's kind of where my recovery sort of started. I wasn't done using yet, but that's sort of where the process of change started for me. Because one of the times I went to the hospital, and one of the doctors slipped a brochure in my pocket for a local drug and alcohol treatment center. And I went home, and it got deposited on the top of my refrigerator. And it sat there for weeks and weeks. And one night I went out and I had no money. I didn't even have money to call Devlin. I literally didn't have quarters to do that. I was in a fight and I came home and I was just all beaten up and I just gave up. And I remembered I had that brochure and I called the number, not knowing what to expect. And they said, well, we want you to sleep it off and we'll call you in the morning. And I hung up and passed out. And they were there for me the next morning with the van and said, if you want to change your life, get in. And I got in. I spent 34 days in White Deer Run, Lancaster. And, over time, I eventually was allowed back into my family's life because I was sober. Had a lot of stuff to unwind and unpack, but I was sober.
To be completely honest, I didn't even know what he was going to be like because I never knew Scott sober. The first 2 years after he was home were really hard for both of us because we were still trying to figure out who we were and getting to know each other. I mean, we really were just getting to know each other all over again.
Shannon's probably the most self-sacrificing person I've ever met. And she does it in a quiet way. She understood enough to know that I couldn't focus on anything other than staying sober. And so she said, I don't want you to do anything. I want you to stay here. I don't want you to worry about work. I don't want you to worry about, you just do what you have to do and get well. And so she gave me that space to do that. That was a process of a couple years until I got to a place where I felt more comfortable in my skin. Devlin was very scared because she was afraid I was going to go back to what I had been before.
When Scott came back to the house, she was 4.
Because children know something's wrong with daddy. Daddy's not okay. I mean, children can sense that. A lot of children don't understand other than mommy or daddy is sick. And that's sort of how it gets explained to children a lot, especially when maybe they go away to treatment or they're living in a recovery house for 6 or 8 months.
She really was just starting to understand what was going on. And then as she was in school, he was home with her when she started school and he was able to stay home with her.
He got sober for me and for my mother and for his family. So he took time out of his day to play with me and hang out with me and just be a dad. And that's why we're so close now.
You can't be there for your children when you aren't capable of being a whole person.
Them having that bond, that really helped her understand that her dad was still her dad and he was sick, but he was getting better.
Hope and purpose are very important parts of recovery. So when you first come in from treatment, you probably are a little unsteady. You don't have a lot of the resources. You don't have the education or the understanding in terms of what's going on. So you don't have a lot of hope or purpose. And as you develop these things and you grow and you heal, you start to see yourself succeeding, especially out in the community. You start to believe and you start to see yourself achieving and you start to develop hope. And then that creates momentum. You practice living in a sober world. You practice learning how to cope and how to live life on life's terms. And eventually you become a whole person that's able to be there more for the family and the kids.
Scott, newly in recovery, is trying to figure out his way. And then Braden had already left the house and she was living with her boyfriend at the time. We kind of knew there was like partying going on and they were high school kids. So it was like we kind of just chalked it up to it was just them, having fun and doing whatever. But then we really didn't realize how bad it was until her boyfriend passed away. So that was kind of like a real eye-opener. So not only were we dealing with Scott's recovery and all of that, how were we going to handle and how were we going to cope with Braden and help her too.
I'm pretty sure I remember my mom saying, you know, she's sick like Daddy. She's sick, but she's gonna get better like Daddy did, and she's gonna get better. She's gonna be okay. She tried going to rehab, and she came back and just went right back to her old patterns. I think recovery is a very long process, and I think what people seem to think is that, you know, progress is more like a straight line, when it's really not. It's going to be up and down, and it's going to be mountains and hills and lots of climbing, and, you know, people tend to want to give up after the first mountain, but you can't.
And then she got pregnant. And at that time, we knew she was using, so it was hard to watch. And then when she had Tyler, I was there when he was born, and I just remember thinking, thank God he's alive. No, she didn't stop using then. 3 months after he was born, her boyfriend had sold something to somebody who died, and they ended up getting arrested, and so that's when Tyler and Braden came to live with me.
What? What are you doing? Hey.
Because I knew that she loved that child. I knew she loved him, and I knew she cared about him. She was just sick, and she just needed to be able to see that. She didn't have any hope. She was kind of where Scott was. But then when she had her child, it was like, you do have something. You have something right in front of you.
I mean, when she went to rehab after she had Tyler, and she came back a whole new person. She stuck to her sobriety. Everything was getting better, and we were all happy, and we were all in one house, and Tyler didn't have any problems, and he was growing up perfectly. And then the car accident happened.
I mean, she was hit head on, had high speed. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt. She had major head trauma. She had brain swelling. Shannon went to Braden, and I went to Tyler in the ER because they both went to separate hospitals.
I just remember going in the room, and he was like, I want mommy, and it just broke my heart, because what are we supposed to say? The doctors seriously were saying that they didn't think she was going to wake up. And then she did.
When I was using, it was just to use, that's it. There wasn't like no attachment, no connection to anything else. When the addiction came around, it was like nothing else mattered. It was pretty much, I was just waking up and figuring out how I was gonna get high that day or get money that day. I have a responsibility to take care of another human when I couldn't even take care of myself. I said, I need to go to a rehab. So I have been sober now for 5 years. Without recovery, I would not be spending all of this time with my family. I wouldn't be able to talk to my family about everything and everything I need to. They're always there. I wouldn't have the support and the love from them, and even my friends too, having them right by my side to be there for me. I have it all.
Hello.
Having my son, it's amazing, because in the beginning I was not there with him to support him and be there for him and love him 24/7. I was focused a lot on my recovery, but now that I have way more time of sobriety, all of my love and focus and attention can go to him and all of the things that he needs from a sober mom. And he needs it. He's needed it the whole time, and now he has every second of it. So knowing that I am here, fully aware and available for anything and everything they need me for, that's what I love the most about it, because I was not that before.
I'm so thankful and blessed that she's still here today, because I swear I thought we lost her. I remember one day she said, I don't know where I would be without your dad and mom. Like, I just don't.
My mom has done more than anyone ever in my life has ever done for me. And no matter what she goes through, she's still always right there by my side. Whenever I need anything or just need to talk to somebody, no matter what personal things that she has going on with her, she's still always there for me and my brothers and my sisters. She is the reason I'm still here, for sure.
I think about all the friends and family that I've lost. This is my brother. He just passed away last year. He has had a long journey with addiction. Started right outside of high school, and he was 44 when he passed. He had been at Teen Challenge for several years, so he was doing really well. But unfortunately, a life of addiction doesn't do well to your body physically, so he ended up passing away way too young. Death doesn't have to be the inevitable result. And so I think finding a healthy pathway to recovery is beneficial for everyone, for families, for the person themselves and communities, everything.
Recovery has been part of my journey. So I've had a front row seat as a patient, as an inmate, as a client, and now I'm on the other side of that as a peer mentor, as a provider, as a coach, as a CRS, as a professional.
All right.
They need people in there that have been there and done that can show them that everything you're experiencing is totally normal, and it's not abnormal, and you just need to keep moving forward. This is Recovery Day Lancaster. It's a celebration for people in recovery in Lancaster County and their families.
The minute he walked out of his recovery house, when he first entered recovery, he decided that he wanted to give back and do something for the community. And Recovery Day has been growing ever since then. So it's very huge for him. It's a big part of his life.
To me, this day means that I get together with my family and celebrate all of us who are in recovery.
This is an excellent opportunity when we put all these vendors in here with all this information and all this outreach for people to come out and understand that there's support and health and different ways, because the tendency is to isolate. It encourages togetherness and unity. We do together what we can't do alone. And it means everything to me. It's my family, but these folks here too are like my family as well. I mean, we're all intertwined together like that.
It's just a really nice day to just kind of get together and enjoy life.
We gotta link up.
When people think about recovery, they think about it's just someone not using. And that's not what it is. It's about giving back in your life and doing things that you wouldn't be able to do if you were using.
I'm still growing and I'm still alive as a man in recovery. Sometimes with the stuff you carry, it takes a long time to put it down.
He's my biggest inspiration. I think he's done really good over the years with trying to get out the message that recovery is important, and it is going to be hard, but it is something you can do.
The future for our family it could be anything. I never imagined we would be here.
At the end of the day, I'm who I am, Braden's who she is. We're all who we are. We're all individually working on ourselves, but we're always a family. And that's the only constant. Everything else can come and go, but my family will always be my family. And we always will be a family, no matter what.
Thanks, Kat. So at this point, we would welcome your questions, your thoughts, your feedback. I have Melanie Avila with me, who is another one of the staff at Joining Forces for Children, and Shannon Tyre, who you saw from the film. So we invite you to unmute and share or use the chat. Shannon, let's buy folks a little bit of time, and I'll tee you up with a question. Can you talk a little bit more about the role that hope played for you and your family?
Sure. I think that I think the main thing was to continue to focus on putting the hope out there in front of me and in front of all of us, and not trying to dwell on what was happening in the moment. I mean, that's pretty much our mantra as a family from day one, just to try to understand that, and really just to understand the science of addiction and what that really means, and get an understanding of the illness, and then knowing that there absolutely is hope, and using that as a goal to try to get to. And it's always out there. It's just a matter of helping and finding the support that you need to get there.
Well said. Well said. Questions from the group on the call today? Or general comments, feedback?
It's just such a powerful video. Like, I think we're all like soaking it in for a minute. I know there's a lot of silence, but I'm like my own self, I'm like just taking a breath after watching it. So, and your vulnerability and sharing it with everybody is such a gift.
I do have a question. I mean, the story of, you being there for everybody in your family, but what did you do for you? I mean, how did you continue? Because you talked about having hope in front of you,
Right.
but you were dealing with a lot and you were there for everybody. So how did you take care of you throughout this process?
That's a really good question, and one I get a lot, actually. I will say that Lancaster County has a ton of resources. I know not a lot of areas do not have the resources that we have. We are truly blessed to have a lot of people and a lot of different things to help people in my situation. I had a lot of support in different areas. I found support in early childhood. I found support in just for families, for parents, grandparents taking care of grandchildren. Thankfully, that is one thing that Lancaster County is doing really well. Like I said, a lot of areas don't have that. So I had tremendous support in many different areas.
Shannon, I've got a question, and it's probably for you, Chris, and Mel as well. One of the things that you mentioned in your response is sort of learning about the science of addiction, and oftentimes, people not having access to that information can create barriers and create
Absolutely.
stigma in the community, which then prevents communities from being able to provide those supports to caring family members. And so, I'm curious, where in the process of supporting the family on a path to recovery did that science come in to your life, and you start to understand it as a sickness? How early in the process did that come to you? And then if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's another good question. And to go back a little bit, our journey started, with my brother, it was a long time ago. But with my husband, that started in 2010. So at that time, if you think about where we were at 2010 and where we are now, it's a huge difference, right? So I didn't understand it at all. And when my husband first went to prison, my understanding was he was a mess and I didn't want to have anything to do with him. And through the whole, I'd say it took us a good 2 or 3 years till we started learning what that really meant. Once he went to his rehab the first time when he got out of prison, they had family programs, and I took advantage of that. Whether or not I was going to stay with my husband didn't matter at that time. I just wanted to know, why was this happening? And we had a daughter together, so I needed to be able to support her as well. That was her dad, and I needed to understand more because I didn't. And so I think it was just that. I think that, and just we just started as a community understanding there was a lot more to it than just they're a bad person and they don't know what they're doing. So I think it helped. The timing of it when we were going through it was helpful, fortunately for us, because we were starting to learn more at that time. Like I said, the first probably 15 years of my brother's addiction, we just looked at him like he was just a mess and he didn't know what he was doing. And unfortunately for him, it took a lot longer. But so I hope that answers your question. A little long.
That was great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it continues to highlight the value and importance of getting that information to people.
Absolutely.
And helping them understand the sickness and the illness in a different way than how we understood it 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Chris and Mel, I'll sort of hog time here because, and also you, Shannon, I know that you all have screened this in your community, and I'm curious what the community, if you wouldn't mind sharing the community's response and things that came up during those conversations. I think that would be really cool to hear.
Yeah, sure. So for that initial screening that we did in the community, we were able to have Scott and Devlin join us as well. Unfortunately, neither one of them were able to attend. So folks were very excited to hear from Devlin and to hear her perspective and experience. And she's a very articulate young woman. So that, of course, resonated with a lot of the folks in the audience that day. Just really being able to understand what it's like living with addiction as a young person, and kind of what support she needed and how she learned to make sense of what was happening. Scott was also able to kind of elaborate more on his process of recovery, and we talked a little bit more about the fact that he wasn't done using substances, but his process of change had begun. And he was able to elaborate a little bit more about what that looks like and what that means for him, and how he's been able to take what he's learned and the recovery capital that he's built over time and share that back with some of the work that he is currently doing now. So like today, for example, he couldn't be with us because he's He's at our local county prison, paying it forward to folks who are currently incarcerated and teaching them and sharing about his story and look at what I did, look at what you can do. So really spreading the hope. The vibe in the room was a lot of excitement, which has led to us having, I think it's 4 or 5 other screenings scheduled. So one of those being with some of our state level partners here in Pennsylvania, who are hosting a mental health and trauma awareness day a month from today. And we will be there screening this and having some discussion, and Shannon and Scott and Devlin will join us, as well as our state level friends have invited some of the State Department leads. So the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs, the Department of Health, Department of Human Services, for them to share their perspective from a state policy level in terms of what they would like to see as we have a new administration sort of getting settled now, and what they would want to do during their tenure. So we're super excited for that opportunity. We will be able to live stream that event as well and really reach a lot more folks and share a little bit about the science, plant some seeds, spread some hope. Super excited. The other opportunities that we have coming up are with some of our other community partners to share with their staff. And we've invited Shannon and Scott and Devlin to participate in those. And so, we're working through the scheduling kinks. I think one of the ones I'm most excited about is being able to share this with our child welfare partners. One of the things that Scott speaks about is the role that child welfare played in his process, understanding that child welfare and him wanted the best. He wanted to be reunited with his family. They wanted that for him too. And collaboratively, they were able to work together to make that happen. So not always a typical response from families. So we're excited to be able to share that back with the staff too, who are incredibly burnt out. Mel, did I forget anything? I always forget something.
No, I just think, like Scott said in the video, that Devlin, I think she was around 4 when this, when she reflects on her experience, the fact that she was scared and the fact that children know. And so I think a lot of the work that I do alongside families is to just help them have those hard conversations, right? Like children observe and know what's going on, and they need to be told what's going on so that they don't develop their own narrative. And so the family every member of the family has their journey of recovery and of learning about addiction as a disease and learning about hope and how to build hope in their lives. So I think that's all I have to add.
It's a great point, Mel, and again, very different from how in the past things have been treated. Addiction has been treated in families, and really, when we think back about, and still to this day, so much of it is kept a secret. And if we try to keep it secret, and if we try to just shield them, they won't know. But what we know is they know. They see what's going on, and they see the hints, and better to really address it and take the lead and give them information that can be helpful as they process it. So thank you for reinforcing that.
Shannon, what else would you like this group to know?
Trying to unmute. I can't even. Oh goodness. I don't know. I think one of the biggest things that I mentioned it when we did our community thing is there's so many different aspects of support. And I kind of mentioned it when Karen, I think, asked the question. Not just for me, but for our family. Like, we found support in, like you just said, the welfare system, early intervention. My grandson was in the early intervention program. We had support from them, doctors, nurses in the ER setting, people from there, churches, obviously, and that can be very, scary for churches sometimes to not know how to address the situation. But we've had support there, and just in all different areas. The schools, my daughter was at a school before, but has now switched to a different school, and the support difference is unbelievable. I mean, the amount of support she has at the school she's at now is just incredible. So yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of different pieces of the puzzle to support people when they have, and support families when they have an addiction issue or a mental health issue or anything like that. It takes so many different aspects of the community. And that's what's really important, that it's not just one piece. It's so many pieces of the puzzle that come together and can help. So that's just a really huge takeaway that I like to make sure everyone understands. It's not just one person, it's many, many people in the process.
I'm interested to know if there was any part of that process that, we were talking about how far we've come, like and how different things are. And I didn't specifically hear, like, you've named all these people. I didn't hear like the legal system or law enforcement. And
so
was there anybody that needs to be brought along?
That's a really good one, because, in our situation, we kind of were in the legal system 2 different times. So once for my husband, and that was not a very fun experience for me. And then there was the experience with my daughter. Now, my daughter was arrested for, help me out here, Chris, what do they call it?
Death by drug delivery.
Thank you. So it was a serious charge, but I feel like in her situation, because of the years that had gone on in between, and there was more knowledge for the police departments and the legal system, and they knew more about addiction. There was so much more support that time. It was like the first time with my husband, it was like, well, you're just his wife. Why don't you just leave him? This is just ridiculous. Why are you sticking around? That kind of thing. And then even though we had a daughter, I mean, they didn't even take that into consideration. Then with my daughter, who was arrested and had a grandson, I mean, there was a lot of things that they should have been treated us very differently, but they didn't. There was more support there. And I think it's definitely getting better. And like I said, I think I'm biased because we have such a great support system in Lancaster County. Not that it's perfect. Definitely could use, no, not everyone is perfect, but I think there was a huge difference in the years between there. So it's definitely showing me that there is progress.
Yeah.
And hope for systems. I mean, it sounds like, not only is there hope for families, but to really nurture that hope in families, there's got to be hope for systems and the opportunity, and showing them the opportunity to evolve and change. And I think that, Shannon, there's so many things to take away here, and again, possible trainings for these different disciplines, right? And how to engage people, how to talk to people, and give them options for hope. As opposed to, continuing stigmatizing, the use of stigmatizing language and old methods of help, or what people thought was helpful, right?
Right, exactly.
Instead of, reinforcing and supporting the family in recovery. And so thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I think that was, one of the things that we tried to convey through this story was, the Tyer family is just a regular family, and they happen to be in recovery. And so here is what it looks like as a family in recovery. I think there are lots of things that many families can resonate with. Oh, they have breakfast at the table too. We do that, just to try to normalize it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, I think that's a really important point, because a lot of times when people think about recovery, it is about the individual who is using versus, you know, there's an increased, I think, awareness that this is a family in recovery. So it isn't just one individual. That's part of it, obviously, but everybody in the family has to recover too. And I think, Shannon, your family is, I mean, just the rock star for showing that really can happen, because there are many times that doesn't happen.
Right.
You know? And even our systems, and I agree with you, I'm from West Virginia, and our systems are making major progress, but we're not there yet to the extent that we should be. And so this recognition that recovery doesn't just mean the individual who was in active use or who now, you know, is in recovery. It isn't just an individual. It's a family. It's a community as well. And so I think that's really an important point, that we need to just push it and push it and push it and push it.
Right.
Yeah, I think another thing to push along with that, it's funny, I've seen this documentary multiple times, but a phrase of Scott stood out to me today. And I think it was Scott, said, sometimes what we carry takes time to lay down. And I think especially for some of our systems, they just need the gentle reminder that these families have been carrying some things for a very long time, and you can't expect it to all be dropped in one instant, right? So just the whole idea that it's a process, and it's a process for each family member. And there needs to be time as they learn about themselves, as they learn about the sickness of addiction, as they learn about hope, for there to be change over time, and to give them the time it takes to lay down the things that need to be laid down. So I really, that phrase stuck out to me today, Shannon. So yeah, thanks again for being able to let the crew follow you. I appreciate it.
One of the comments that I got when we shared this with some of our internal stakeholders here at our agency was, you know, the video is great, so much hope, but it portrays the recovery process as maybe a bit more linear than it is in reality. So I think yes, and we did that on purpose, right? Like in a 20-minute film.
It would have been several hours long if we would have covered everything.
Yeah. So, you know, I think as we continue to share this and have opportunity for discussion to make sure that, you know, we can clarify some of those things for folks, you know, to know that this is one family's experience, and that another family's experience is not going to look exactly the same, but they can recover whatever that looks like for them as a family. And it won't necessarily be at the same rate that Shannon and Devlin and Scott and Braden and Tyler have done, but that they can do it too.
That's why I think it's important to call it recovery and not recovered, because, you know, it's a process, and we're not all in the same process together at the same time in the same way. Everyone's story is different. Even in our little family, we all have different stories. So.
Other thoughts, questions?
It's just really nice to hear the support. Like, I'm thinking, you know, so many times we spend time on like what isn't working. So when you're like, you know, and Shannon's saying our community like really got behind, I'm just like, oh, like it makes me hopeful to hear that that's happening. Really, like that's my little takeaway from this. Sometimes we come out of these things thinking, oh, systems are never going to change, and our discussion today has been, we used to be not so great, but that's okay because we're getting better, which is in parallel to recovery, right? Like we have a lot to learn. So, but this is very hopeful. So if that was your intention, A+, because it was great.
Thank you.
If we're all out of questions. Okay, just wanted one more opportunity. I can go ahead and start wrapping things up. Let me pull up the slides again because it's got important links on it and everything. All right. So here we go. There we go. All right, so thank you so much for everything and for all the excellent questions and the discussion. It was great. Few quick announcements. We would greatly appreciate it if everyone filled out this post-event survey that will be sent in the chat in a moment. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes to complete. The link will also be sent to all registered participants via email from the obc-gta@jbsinternational.com email address. Announcements and invitations for the next office hour session will also be distributed via that listserv. So, and feel free to share that invitation with any interested colleagues, stakeholders, community teams, etc. If you have suggestions for future office hour topics or would like to volunteer an individual or grantee as an office hour presenter, you can fill out the form that I will also send in the chat in a moment. This form is also linked in the flyer and in every listserv for office hour sessions. So, you know, if you ever have any ideas or suggestions for stuff you want to see, fill out the form and we'll take it into consideration. The presentation and recording slides will be distributed via the OVC TTA listserv in the coming days. So please stay tuned for updates on future office hour sessions. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at obce-tta@jbsinternational.com. Trying to locate the chat so I can send the links. There we go. Thank you everyone for attending. We hope that you enjoyed this and that it was informational and good, and it was I liked it. I don't know why I'm saying stuff right now. I think I'm rambling at this point. First link in the chat is the survey for about the session, survey telling us how this office hour session went, if there's anything we could do to improve. Second link is suggestion form. So fill that out at your leisure. And again, thank you so much for coming. We hope you enjoyed.